Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat teaching with TBA Rabbinic Intern Jake Petzold.
I just wanted to start by asking, what do we know about Thanksgiving? What is Thanksgiving? Where does it come from? Why Thanksgiving? This is not a trick question. Just I want to hear where we're starting from.
Well, Thanksgiving is a proclamation.
Okay. Proclamation, that's right.
It's
Made by?
the President of the United States.
Yeah, that's right.
Every year.
Yeah.
And one of the bad ceremonies the presidents have put up with is pardoning a turkey.
That's right.
Which sounds a little bit like the sacrificial decision of Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
The other thing is we were told that the Pilgrims gave Thanksgiving before their first winter.
Mm-hmm. I love how you put it. We were told.
That's correct.
Yeah. All right, that's a pretty good summary, yeah? What do you...
Yeah, I think there's generally collectively an image of Native Americans and Pilgrims kind of eating happily and without conflict together on a table outside somewhere.
Yeah.
Pumpkin pie.
That's right. And you mentioned presidential proclamation, and we've mentioned the sort of the first Thanksgiving, the Pilgrims and the Native folks eating together. Do we have a sense of when Thanksgiving started? Any guesses?
We learned, just for those of you who were not in the library with me today,
Mm.
we learned why turkey was justified as kosher, which is that birds were according to the custom. And that is birds, what type of birds were kosher were according to the custom. Turkey was called Tarnagola Hodu, and the assumption was the Jews in India ate turkey, and consequently it was declared as kosher.
Right. But I'm not sure, it's not a requirement to necessarily have to put turkey at Thanksgiving. It's not halakha.
Well, there's no halacha or anything. There's virtually... I spent a little bit of time trying to look through the CJL, like the Chuvot on Thanksgiving, and there's like nothing there.
I know that turkey, traditionally the big thing on Thanksgiving is the meal. It's supposed to be about giving thanks for what we have.
Yep.
And yeah, they're
Quite a bit like
turkey being one.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, for me, the Thanksgiving halakha is eating matzah and karpas and having a meal, Passover.
You mean that Seder occupies the same
Occupies the same.
place for us? That's a really interesting thought.
Yeah. But as far as time period, the question you asked,
Yeah.
I think in Jamestown.
Okay. So 17th century?
Yeah, it started in Jamestown, which is the first American settlement.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, 1620.
Joey, do you want to do one?
And also, yeah, predates the country.
Yep, certainly. So, lots of threads here. Oh, yeah, please.
It seems like a lot of our holidays have a thankful theme to them.
You mean like Jewish holidays, or you mean the American holidays? Yeah.
Sorry, Jewish holidays wasn't too clear. Like Passover, as you mentioned, is like we're thankful that we escaped slavery,
Yep.
and then Hanukkah has that kind of thing too, where because we thought people was only the last one to be in the lasting 8.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing there.
So something you're pointing out both together is this idea of sort of the specific thankfulness, right? Thankful, and do we have a sense of Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving? Is it a specific thankfulness or an abstract thankfulness?
I always thought it was a harvest thing.
Harvest, okay. That's certainly one of the things.
And the rhythm of it, especially in the north, is that it's the last moment before the onset of the long winter.
Yeah.
Last moment, say
Before the onset of the long winter.
I think as kids, we're taught, really not PC, but we're taught that this was the way that we were grateful for the land that we now live on.
Yeah.
Which, of course, then when you get older and learn the actual story, you recognize is problematic on a lot of levels, but I think that's the gratitude that we're supposed to at least imagine, the specific gratitude.
Yeah.
And then I think around many tables, people will talk about like more global, so to speak, like familial gratitude and gratitude for the lives that they have, not necessarily the gratitude of homeland and, I don't know, America.
Yeah. So, okay, yes, there's both. There's also, so, okay, we're hearing harvest, we're hearing homeland in America, we're hearing a general gratitude. We've talked about what's sort of known as the Great Dinner. The Great Dinner myth is the myth of the first Thanksgiving, right? Is the Great Dinner myth. So just to talk about for a moment what we're not going to talk about, I'm going to pass these out. So Thanksgiving emerged. It preceded the American colonialism or the European colonization of America. Thanksgiving emerges from long-standing Protestant traditions that especially emerged in the Church of England that are not uncommon if you look at Jewish history. That were it was not as an annual thing, but as a specific one-time call-out. We're thankful for this thing, and we've appointed a day of Thanksgiving. You know, we've won this war, so we'll have a day of Thanksgiving. We've had an exceptional harvest this year, we'll have a day of Thanksgiving. And that made its way over with the European settlers in the 17th century. Pardon me. In a moment, we'll look at the very first Thanksgivings, but I want to talk about we've come to this place in our culture where it's sort of impossible to extract Thanksgiving as a concept from this mythology around the first Thanksgiving that we've all come to know. So I just want to dispense with that a little bit and move on. And so this is from this first entry here is just from a wonderful book called "This Land Is Their Land." It's a historian at GW who wrote about the mythology. He doesn't actually talk about what Thanksgiving is. He spends a lot more time on what Thanksgiving isn't and the mythology and actual history around that the so-called first Thanksgiving, the Great Dinner. And this comes from his introduction, and I'll read it sort of quickly. The Pilgrim. This mythology, as this is like a 500-page book, and I pulled something from the introduction that sort of summarizes where the mythology emerged. And so I want to talk about, we'll identify the myth and then we'll move backwards. The Pilgrim Saga had utility in the nation's culture wars. So we're talking about mid-19th century, early to mid-19th century, that it's starting. It was no coincidence that authorities began trumpeting the Pilgrims as national founders amid widespread anxiety that the country was being overrun by Catholic and then Jewish immigrants unappreciative of America's Protestant democratic origins and unfamiliar with its values. Depicting the Pilgrims as the epitome of colonial America also served to minimize the country's long-standing history of racial oppression. So now we're moving forward about a century. At a time when Jim Crow was working to return the blacks to the South as close to a state of slavery as possible, and racial segregation was becoming the norm nearly everywhere else. Though Americans eventually assumed that the Thanksgiving holiday and myth had marched together in an unbroken succession since 1621, those traditions were very much products of white Protestants, particularly Northerners, asserting their cultural authority over European immigrants and Americans of color in the 19th and early 20th centuries. This myth permitted colonial New England, and by extension, modern America, to become seats of freedom, democracy, Christianity, and plenty.
No, I'm laughing only because it's a time when you gorge yourself and eat turkey and have family together. I mean, no one really, I think, looks at it as a religious observance.
But I don't totally agree with that because with a lot of holidays, like I've gone to Passover Seders that go beyond, our time in liberation from Egypt. They try to relate Passover to the modern day, that there's still quite a people that live in bondage.
Yeah.
All kinds of bondage, including bondage to drugs and medications and, all kinds of bondage. I've been to observances where people try to make it they try to show some relevance to it. They try to make it more than just a big dinner. You know, so you can look at Passover as just a big dinner, but I'd rather it be something other than a big dinner. Being we can eat big dinners every single night of the year if we want to. So there's flexibility. There's flexibility in Thanksgiving to make it as relevant to our times as you want to.
Yeah.
Beyond just being a big dinner.
And I love your point here about it being a big dinner, which is in some sense what, like that's, I mean, I have come to think of it as like that's the essential mitzvah. Like you haven't celebrated Thanksgiving unless you've had the meal. But otherwise, we don't have really unified, today in 21st century America, we don't really have unified rituals around Thanksgiving. There historically was one other piece. So of the universal ritual for Thanksgiving that has fallen by the wayside. So let's jump into the first Thanksgiving. We're getting to it. Yeah, it's setting us up. I'm building suspense here.
Michael's excited.
And also, I think we're going to find actually that there is some innate meaning that we don't need to do a lot of gymnastics to bring it to our time. So, does anybody have a really good Washington impression? Yeah, George Washington. These things were all written, so it does not require a...
He superseded television.
He's asking someone to read it.
Yeah. All right. I'm happy. If anyone would like to read it, I'm also happy to read it, and I'm a little familiar. Yeah, exactly. Yep. And also, it's like funny punctuation, and I'm familiar with it. So, and I'm going to skip through it, but I'm going to. All right. Whereas it is the duty of all. So, sorry, 1789. What's happening?
Constitution.
All right. Yeah, brand new America, right? The war's been won, and there's a new constitution, there's a new union, it's been ratified, and Washington has been, for the first time, sworn in as president from the United States Capitol in... Anyone? New York, yeah. All right. So Washington, there's a movement, Congress asks him to do this, and he eventually puts out this proclamation. Whereas it is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey his will, to be grateful for his benefits, and to humbly implore his protection and favor. And whereas both houses of Congress have made me do this, now therefore, skipping to the next paragraph, do I recommend and assign Thursday, the 26th of November next, to be devoted by the people of these states to the service of that great and glorious being, who is the beneficent author of all the good that was, that is, or that will be, that we may then all unite in rendering unto him our sincere and humble thanks for his kind care and protection of the people of this country previous to their becoming a nation, for the signal and manifold mercies and the favorable interpositions of his providence, which we experienced in the course and conclusion of the late war, that's the Revolutionary War, for the great degree of tranquility, union, and plenty which we have since enjoyed, for the peaceable and rational manner in which we've been able to establish constitutions of government for our safety and happiness. So constitutions there, I think, like it's telling that it's not the Constitution. He's referring to 14 constitutions and just sort of telling about, just how we understood what the Union of America was at the time. Establish constitutions of government for our safety and happiness, and particularly the national one now lately instituted, for the civil and religious liberty with which we are blessed, the means we have of acquiring and diffusing useful knowledge, and in general for all the great and various favors which he hath been pleased to confer upon us. And also, that we may then unite in most humbly offering our prayers and supplications to the great Lord and ruler of nations, and beseech him to pardon our national and other transgressions, to enable us all, whether in public or private stations, to perform our several and relative duties properly and punctually, to render our national government a blessing to all the people, by constantly being a government of wise, just, and constitutional laws, discreetly and faithfully executed and obeyed, to protect and guide all sovereigns and nations, especially such as have shown kindness unto us, so France, basically, and to bless them with good government, peace, and concord, to promote the knowledge and practice of true religion and virtue, and the increase of science among them and us, and generally to grant unto all mankind such a degree of temporal prosperity as he alone knows to be best. Okay, what?
Well said.
Yeah. Say more. What do you like about it? What do you notice?
Well, it's not so much what I like about it. What I think he did was he's saying what he thinks the future should be.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is a guy who didn't want to be a dictator.
Yeah.
He easily did. Unlike current. George Washington really was a good guy.
Yeah.
War hero.
So, I mean, what's not here? I mean, we talked about... I'm sorry? No sense for how to do it? The word
Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Well, there's one. It's there once.
We know what they're getting at, but it is.
Oh, sorry. I skipped over it. I'm sorry. In what the Congress, the Joint Committee of Congress, yeah, to recommend to the people of the United States a day of public thanksgiving and prayer. I should not have skipped that. So sorry. So Congress passed this. It says they asked the president to proclaim or to recommend to the people of the United States a day of public thanksgiving and prayer to be observed by acknowledging with grateful hearts the many signal favors of Almighty God, and especially by affording them an opportunity peaceably to establish a form of government for their safety and happiness.
So it seems more like thank God we won this war, not thank God
Yeah.
that we survived the winter 100 years ago.
Yes, that's right. Thank God we won this war, and thus there's something else to it, right?
We'll have plenty and we'll have good government.
Yeah.
See, when I walk in New Jersey, I see a sign, this house belonged to a Tory and now it's someone else. So the country there's probably still a hell of a lot of people that wish, back in the old days,
Yeah.
when they had kings and everything else. We're trying to encourage the forces there.
Yeah.
It's all context.
Yeah.
What's happening at the time.
Right, and one of the interesting things here is Thanksgiving, as Washington is imagining it, is it a religious holiday or not?
I'm not sure what's obvious, Washington it fell upon his shoulders to establish the presidency and establish the form of government the United States would have. And he makes that clear, to establish a form of government. He uses that phrase because at that time, the United States was not a world power. We were brand new,
Yeah.
new. We had to establish ourselves. And that was Washington's role.
Yeah. So form of government. That's right. And so I'm hearing form of government is important here.
No Native American.
No mention of native. Yeah, of natives.
Oh, they were savages back then.
Right. That's right.
But you asked the question about prayer and spirituality, or you used a different word.
I said, is it a religious holiday?
And
Yes.
Yeah, it sounds like there was.
You say yes.
Lots of religious
Yeah.
aspects.
Actually, can we do a poll? Based on this, is Washington imagining a religious holiday? If you say yes, raise your hand.
Say it one more time, I couldn't hear you.
If based on what we've just read from Washington's proclamation, is he proclaiming a religious holiday?
Yeah.
So raise your hand if yes. Okay, I'm saying yes too.
Look how political it is.
Yeah.
We want to protect and guide all sovereigns and nations, quote, especially such as those shown kindness unto us.
Yeah.
France.
Yeah.
Screw you, England.
Yeah.
There. He's basically saying, look, democracy didn't exist. He's basically saying, we have to now have a democracy here.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's political.
But he's asking about religious.
But you're saying there you're saying it's political because it's not religious.
Got it.
Yeah. And I think
Prayer and supplication sounds like a compelling case for religion.
yeah.
And providence and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't necessarily mention what religion. It mentions God.
Yeah.
Asking for pardon. It doesn't quote.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, providence is certainly, there's some, Christian theological signals here, but it does not quote them or invoke them specifically.
Remember, people
You
were
have a-
against the Puritans. That Philadelphia was a
Yeah.
Quaker state. Rhode
Yeah.
Island was established. So there was
Maryland was Catholic.
most of the founding fathers were deists.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
What religion are they going to do? You know,
It's interesting. You asked what's not here, and one of the things that's not here is dinner, right? Which is
Right.
what we all
That's right.
kind of referred to. And
The essential mitzvah.
And I'm thinking about in terms of like our holidays and like the mitzvot around these holidays that do have gratitude as part of them. And the Seder, though it has food elements that are symbolic for pedagogical ability for us to understand gratitude, the meal actually isn't a big part of the Seder either, right? We eat dinner because we're Jews and we're doing it around dinner time, but the eating of karpas and the eating of maror is not to satisfy your hunger, it's to pedagogically teach you how we felt as slaves and how we felt in freedom.
Yeah.
And then, what?
There's Shulchan Aruch.
No, I just said that, like, there is dinner, but that it's not. That's not
No, it's
like.
one of the components.
Yeah.
Right. But that's not. It's not a halachic component in terms of symbolism. And that's the same with Thanksgiving. It seems here that without mentioning dinner, that there was a way in showing gratitude by bringing people together in these different ways. That then it seems probably turned into some kind of breaking bread together with those people as opposed to just in prayer with them in a synagogue or church, as it may be.
Does anybody know why we eat what we eat on Thanksgiving?
Only because you told me.
Kathy?
Well, it gets back to the symbolic, the food, and it gets back to the Native Americans. I mean, all the traditional foods on Thanksgiving are, indigenous to North America. Squash.
And New England in particular.
Squash, corn, turkey,
Yeah.
pumpkin or squash. All everything we're supposed to eat is a Native American food. So it is all there. It's highly symbolic.
And in that case, it's like you mean both capital N, capital A, and also lowercase n, capital A, right? These are Native American foods, right? So that is what you.
Yeah, and they were
yeah.
in the myth shared by Native American people with the first colonists.
So to bring it back to our question about harvest and the land, again, it's not instructed here at our founding Thanksgiving document, but what we are eating when we're eating is specifically about here. Not here, it's about New England, but it's about American life. I want to come back to, though, it's not a religious holiday because it's a political holiday. Because I think we have lots of examples of things being both in our world, not just here. And so, exactly as you mentioned about context, what I can't help think is civil religion, right? Brand new country with no established church, which is groundbreaking, right? But how do you instill in people's hearts something, a citizenship, a kinship that's based on something else other than an established church? And so I think that this is sort of in some ways our first, one of our proto documents of like American civil religion, because I think this is explicitly a religious holiday and non-sectarian, right? Because it does serve political purposes, but it's saying America, we're all religious, even if we don't have an established church, and we're all monotheists, and we think that God is male, and however you worship that God, this is a day to do it because we share this gratitude for some of these things we've been talking about. We won the war. So the two things that I've heard that I think we've heard established most is won the war. Three things I'll say is won the war, form of government, and the sort of possibility of plenty, possibility of growth.
If it's supposed to provide a forced unification for the young country, why is it just the 26th day of November as opposed to every third Thursday in November, which is not?
Right. That's a great question. So, it's because it emerges in this tradition of one-off. There's not even a concept of annual Thanksgiving. It just emerges from this New England Protestant tradition of when you have some. It's not unfamiliar to our ancient traditions, like when you would have a fast day, right, because of something in the community. Not unfamiliar to to us, not just our ancient tradition, right? You have special appointed fast days, or you might have special appointed Thanksgiving days that commemorate specific events. It's a Suda. Anyway. So there wasn't even an idea of making it permanent, and there was also, again, it's like the first Western country of its kind without an established religion. They don't even have the idea of a permanent holiday doesn't even exist yet in America, right? It's just this, and so what happens is the holiday sort of floats around, and it does often get observed around that time, but not at a presidential level. And in fact, so Washington did it not every year, but most years of his presidency. And then Adams, same. And then Jefferson objected because he thought it was a First Amendment issue. He thought that a national day of Thanksgiving was explicitly prohibited by the separation of church and state. So Jefferson refused to participate in Thanksgiving and refused to proclaim Thanksgiving for that reason. The holiday floated around until 1863, when Lincoln proclaimed two Thanksgivings in 1863. The first one, and that's the text that we have here, which I'm not going to read, but well, I'm gonna just read a couple of sentences. So this is from late July 1863. It has pleased Almighty God to hearken to the supplications and prayers of an afflicted people, and to vouchsafe to the Army and Navy victories on land and on sea, so signal and so effective as to furnish reasonable grounds for augmented confidence that the union of these states will be maintained, their constitution preserved, and their peace and prosperity permanently restored, etc., etc. Now therefore be it known that I do set apart Thursday, the 6th day of August next, to be observed as a day for national thanksgiving, praise, and prayer. And I invite the people of the United States to assemble on that occasion in their customary places of worship, and in the forms approved by their own consciences, render the homage due to the divine majesty for the wonderful things he has done in the nation's behalf, and invoke the influence of his Holy Spirit to subdue the anger which has produced and so long sustained a needless and cruel rebellion, to change hearts and minds, etc. Why do we think so? Okay. Late July 1863. We've been talking about context. What do we think this is about?
Civil War.
You want to be any yes, Civil War?
Emancipation Proclamation.
Not quite.
No, it's a victory that I'm trying to remember how victory was.
Related to his most famous rhetoric.
No,
It was Gettysburg. Yeah. So this is the month of Gettysburg, of the Battle of Gettysburg, which was a Union victory. And there was a sense that it was going to build momentum.
Turning time.
Yep. And so there was this day of Thanksgiving proclaimed. Now remember, only in the northern states, right? Because Lincoln says, the U.S.'s contention is that he's the president of all of the country. But at that point, lots of folks, only half of the country recognizes him.
remember also the symbols of the holiday presume a northern.
Yes, totally. It's like a northern orientation.
We moved to California from the East Coast, and we don't feel Christmas quite in the same
Yeah.
way here because there's not the snow, not the onset of winter.
Yeah.
And all the stuff on television, indicates the snows, the wagons, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, sleigh rides. Yeah. So,
We find it's Christmas-like here.
as several Jews have written about for Broadway. So Lincoln here is doing something that Washington's doing too, right? Though, which is try to give us something to unite as a people, and also this is also, I think, overtly political, right? This is saying we're thankful for the Union victories in the Civil War. So he goes on in 1863 to then appoint a National Day of Thanksgiving in November. That is, very similar language. It's less specific about, the recent military victories, but it's a lot of the sort of same. It's very Lincoln-y, and it's a lot of this. And basically, since then, presidents have proclaimed a National Day of Thanksgiving every year. It's floated around a little bit, and in the 40s. This is a detour, but if someone wants to hear about it floating around and partisan divisions over the timing of Thanksgiving, I'm happy to chat about it after this. But I wanted to bring us to this idea. So we've talked about the feast, we've talked about presidential proclamation, and as Lincoln, we only have this one example here, but this language that he uses to assemble in their customary places of worship and in the forms approved by their consciences is characteristic of how many presidents have instructed Americans to observe. So that brings us to three components that I think of as the kind of ritual stakes, right? So one is a proclamation. The proclamation always invokes some sort of covenant, some sort of like the Constitution or the Declaration or like some sort of elevated, entity or idea that we as Americans are connected to, and then go worship in your house of prayer, and then feast. Those three things. So as we're wrapping up this session and heading into our Thanksgiving week, I'm wondering if we were to internalize the spirit of Thanksgiving as Washington and Lincoln imagined it, tossing out the myth of the great dinner and the first Thanksgiving, if we were to focus on these things, being gratitude for American life and for our forms of government, what would be Jewish ways? How should we as Jews respond to this call for Thanksgiving, to observe a day of Thanksgiving? There's no right answer. I'm just wondering, this comes back to exactly how Rabbi Schatz started this, because I've learned this history, and my answer is that I'm not always a daily minyan goer. I'm sometimes a minyan goer, but I'm after learning this history, that's what I do on Thanksgiving now. Thanksgiving morning for me always is going to make sure I'm davening. What else do we think? And also, I'm trying to convince Rabbi Schatz that she should do. I don't look at the. I thought you said that Thanksgiving was specifically a morning you don't come.
Saturday.
Got it.
It's interesting because in the Reconstructionist prayer book, there's a whole ritual for Thanksgiving.
Ooh, I haven't seen that.
By Mordecai Kaplan and Ira Eisenstein, including the specific set of prayers for Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Oh, really?
As the Americanized, the Reconstructionism was the deeply American.
Is it in the present Reconstructionist? In the current Reconstructionist Siddur?
In the original.
Yeah.
In the
Okay.
original
I don't.
I haven't seen the current
Oh,
one.
okay. The current one I have on my shelf, and I didn't see that, so I'll have to.
In the original one, there's an entire
Okay.
ritual for
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, and I believe that in our Siddur, if I remember correctly, there may also be something for Thanksgiving.
Well, let's see.
Take a look.
Yeah.
I think we should all go to Costco.
I mean, there's Hallel.
I think we'll be back somewhere at the end.
New Year's is, they look at, they do have to hear what's happened during the year, where were we last year, what's,
Yeah.
What has happened since the last Thanksgiving, they kind of rethink what.
Yeah, I mean, I think that.
happened over the year, and,
I think that's lovely, and I think that we don't need it. In some sense.
Lincoln and Washington, they looked at where America was at the time, and we sometimes look at where our country is at the time. And
I mean, I think.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it'd be really nice if in terms of our own Jewish practice and the things that bring us together, I don't think that, I'm not trying to be, to dissuade people from the realistic nature of having a dinner, but inviting people to that dinner who you really are grateful to have in your lives, and making it an opportunity to share in blessing not only over food, but to those people in a way that sometimes makes us feel uncomfortable, because we're just not a people that necessarily go up to someone and say how grateful we are for another person. But then also treating it, I know that for me, Thanksgiving always feels so weird because it feels like Shabbat, but I can have my phone on the table. And I like to make it feel a little bit more like Shabbat, like creating rituals that could bring light into your home, that could bring the joy and the differentiation that Kiddush is supposed to bring into your home. Like coming up with those kinds of ritual actions that make it differentiated from just a regular dinner on a Monday.
So I've wondered, like, should there be a Thanksgiving Kiddush?
Should be a Thanksgiving
Kiddush.
Yeah. Yeah, like we have festival, like, various festival Kiddush or Shabbat. I was also wondering, like, should we say Hallel on Thanksgiving? I think, I think yes. Like, this is, not a fair, I'm inclined to think yes. This is a hypothesis. But it strikes me as, like, that's what, when I read these presidential proclamations, and again, as I said, this Lincoln one, go to your own houses of worship and assemble as is customary, which is very characteristic of other presidential proclamations. I think, like, to me, I love what you're suggesting for how do we do it at the meal. And I'm also thinking, like, the instruction is go to your community as you always do and be thankful for America there. And so I also, it strikes me, I'm wondering about what is it that we have that would be our customary or, approved by our own consciences to celebrate on that day. And so I think, for instance, Hallel, which is not terribly exciting, but, like, is one of them. And that's what actually is here. I mean, like, that's what, they're just offering a psalm. It's not, they're just offering a psalm here. Like, there's not actually a separate prayer here. Although I'm going to look up. I was looking to see if I could find any Kaplan essays on Thanksgiving, and I didn't, but I'm going to. But
they're also in the 50s and 60s, going as late as the 70s, there were Orthodox congregations, I stress Orthodox congregations, in Manhattan that used to have an 11 a.m., not a service, an 11 a.m. Lecture and major address by some sort of classical American figure gathering in the synagogue, because it was the only time, since it was not a prayer service directly, it's the only time that men and women sat in the synagogue together.
Oh.
And that would happen at the Jewish Center, and it would happen at Kilat Jeshurun, the places that I knew had that. But
That's
I imagine it was a larger custom if it came to those places as well.
It was, and also another version of it was these sort of ecumenical, like pan-religious gatherings. Like lots of cities would have smaller cities would have like a citywide Thanksgiving ceremony that would bring together a bunch of different religious leaders to each sort of do a Thanksgiving prayer. Or actually, I was talking to, if anybody knows, Rabbi Morris Panitz at ICAR. He was saying that growing up in, I think, Newport News, Virginia, at their synagogue, there was always a community-wide service on Thanksgiving morning that invited everyone, not just Jews, to come be a part of explicitly, and that was explicitly part of it. And I don't know if that's still going, but that was customary well into the 20th century to have these kinds of gatherings in houses of worship on the morning of Thanksgiving. So this has been lovely. I do want to just acknowledge that I printed out one other thing we're not reading, which I think is very cool. So I just invite everyone to take it home and take a peek at. This is from after Washington proclaimed that first day of Thanksgiving in 1789. A leader of Beth Shalom congregation in Richmond, Virginia, wrote this prayer for the Medina to be read in their synagogue on Thanksgiving morning. And so Medina is like state, the new state. So it's a prayer for our new state. And this is like the best preserved version of this, but there is evidence of many congregations throughout America responding to Washington's proclamation with prayers kind of like this.
I noticed that he's not rabbi.
His dad, son of a rabbi.
Almost good.
He's not rabbi because the first rabbi did not come to the United States
Yeah, exactly.
until the 19th century.
Right, so they heavily relied on the children of rabbi. So actually, I cut out the signature at the bottom where he specifically says the son of the rabbi. I mean, in English, and I thought, American congregations heavily relied on folks, who had informal training for the first 100 years.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.